Welcome, everybody. My name is Justin Reich. It's terrific to have you here. I'm joined by my EdTech teacher co-founder, Tom DeCord, who's going to be watching the Q&A as the session goes on. So if you're interested in asking a question, feel free to type things in there, and Tom will keep an eye out and follow along from there. I hope you all have had a terrific day at the Google Education on Air conference, and looking forward to having you together here with me for the next half an hour or so. So why don't I go ahead and get the presentation started, and then we can get going. So my name is Justin Reich. This is a presentation called Launching Innovation in Schools. I have two roles. I'm the executive director of the Teaching Systems Lab at MIT. We're a research group. We study the complex technology-rich classrooms of the future and the systems that we need to help educators thrive in those settings. And I'm the co-founder of a consultancy that works with teachers and school leaders to integrate technology called EdTech Teacher. This January, on January 17th, with some colleagues, I'm launching a free online course for school leaders through the edX platform. It's a MOOC, a massive open online course. It's called Launching Innovation in Schools. And the idea behind the course is to help school leaders understand what it takes to be able to launch new instructional improvement initiatives within your school, and then figure out how to sustain them and help them grow. This work comes out of both my own research and that of my colleagues. So the course is co-instructed by Peter Senge, who's a senior lecturer at MIT's Sloan School of Management. He wrote a book called The Fifth Discipline in the 1990s. Which is one of the seminal leadership and management texts used in lots of different sectors, but certainly in education. And then for the past 10 years, I've been working with schools through this consultancy, EdTech Teacher, and we routinely come across one of the most common kinds of challenges in innovation, especially innovation around education technology, is that schools and districts will make big investments in new technologies. And what we'll find is that in those schools or districts, there are a handful of really extraordinary teachers who are doing amazing things, who are transforming the way that teaching and learning is happening with their students. But then we don't see that same kind of change and innovation spread throughout an entire district. What we find is pockets of excellence in lots of schools. Maybe every school that's out there has some kind of pocket of excellence that's using technology in really compelling ways. But there are many more places where we don't see that pocket of excellence scale and spread to be real systemic change across a grade level team or a school building or a whole district. So that's what we're most interested in trying to figure out, is how do we help schools and districts launch innovations that spread and sustain across whole communities. So in this free online course that we're offering, Launching Innovation in Schools, there are 4 topics that we'll discuss over the course of 6 weeks. Bringing people together around ideas that they care about. That's about figuring out what communities really care about and how we can bring their voice and the strengths of your school into new innovation. Refining and vision and getting to work. How do we get people together on the same page to be able to launch new ideas? Working together through ups and downs, recognizing that trying new things always involves communication, collaboration, and challenges and conflict, and so figuring out how we manage that. And then measuring progress and adjusting, figuring out how do we try new things, explore how well they're working, look closely at the results of our efforts, and then adjust them as we practice and make more sense of what we're doing. The course will be 6 weeks long. It'll take about an hour or two a week, hopefully easy enough to fit in people's school schedules. And what I want to try to do with the rest of our time together is to just give you a little slice, a little sampling of the kinds of things that we'll do in this longer free class. One of the really essential ideas that we try to bring forward in thinking about going from pockets of excellence to scaled systemic change is that it's increasingly clear that innovation really happens through iteration. There was a vision in the industrial era that innovation would happen through planning. That you'd say, okay, this is exactly the way that we want to do things, and this is a plan that we'll lay out, and then we just need to get everyone on board that plan, and we need to get everyone to implement it in the right way, and that's how innovation occurs. What we find, though, in lots of different sectors, especially as we've had a chance to explore innovation with new kinds of technologies and new kinds of software tools, is that innovation is really the result of multiple iterations, multiple experimentations, making sense of what you're doing and moving forward. There was a great article in the New York Times this past week called "The New Workplace is Agile and Nonstop. Can you keep up?" Agile refers to an approach to software development that, again, sort of eschews long-term planning and instead says, what can we accomplish this week? What can we accomplish in the next 2 weeks? How can we take one step forward, see whether or not we're making progress, and build one further step on top of that? And it's an idea that really grew within the software industry, but is spreading to lots of different sectors. This was an insurance agent, law firms, all kinds of different spaces are being inspired by this idea of innovation through iteration rather than innovation through planning. Another frame that people use to think through these ideas is design thinking. Here's a design thinking framework from the Eureka Lab at the Meadowbrook School outside of Boston. And again, the idea that we're bringing to students here is that if they want to be able to solve complex, ill-structured problems, they need to make sense of the problem. They need to define what the problem is. They need to imagine solutions. They need to prototype and deploy those solutions as soon as possible. They need to get new ideas out into the world and test them in relatively short cycles. They need to try those ideas, gather data about whether or not they're working, and then explore whether or not their solutions have made an impact and how they've changed the people that they're trying to affect. This inclination towards iteration, innovation through iteration, towards design thinking, towards cycles of innovation. One of the things that Peter Senge and I have found over the years is that it's the schools who can embody these kinds of approaches that make the most progress in going from pockets of excellence with technology innovation to real scaled and sustained change. One of the tools that we use to help people make sense of these cycles and this innovation through iteration in the course is what we call the cycle of experiment and experience. This is a framework for thinking about what kinds of things teachers can do as school leaders to be able to bring new innovations to life in their schools, and then what are the different ways that administrators and school leaders can support them. Another key insight to start with is the answer to this question: who has the most impact on teacher pedagogy and practice? If you were to go and interview teachers and ask them the question, who has the most influence on how you teach? There are lots of potential answers to that question. It could be principals, it could be superintendents, it could be students, it could be parents. But it turns out that the #1 answer is other teachers. The #1 answer to the question, who has the most impact on teacher pedagogy and practice, is other teachers. And so really, if we want to have teachers be trying new things, if we want to have innovation scale and spread throughout a school district, then one of the most important things that we can do is figure out how we support and sustain teacher-to-teacher sharing and teacher-to-teacher communication. If you're a consultant, if you're a coach, if you're a school principal, this actually isn't necessarily the best news for you. It turns out that teachers, when we ask them who has the most influence on their pedagogy, they don't name coaches, they don't name school principals, they name other teachers. As school leaders, that means that our challenge is to think about how do we set up the conditions in schools so that new innovations have the chance to spread teacher to teacher. The cycle of experiment and experience kind of explains how this is possible and how this might happen. The inner loop, the loop in red, is really the domain of teachers. Teachers are absolutely essential to spreading and scaling new innovations in schools. Because teachers are #1, the only people in school buildings who can really actually implement new innovations. There are folks like administrators who can make sure that we can buy enough computers or tablets or whatever else for everyone. But the only people who can really make new teaching and learning practices happen day to day in schools and classrooms are teachers and library media specialists and other kinds of support staff who do day-to-day work with teachers. So what we find is that in essentially every school we visit, there's always a small group of teachers who are willing to conduct experiments. They're willing to move past the fear and anxiety that comes along with trying new things in classrooms, to take new technologies and to implement new approaches to teaching and learning. Ideally, when they conduct those experiments, There's experience that's developed through that, sometimes just with that one teacher, but oftentimes actually with sort of a smaller group of folks. So maybe with a coach who's helping them implement that practice, maybe with an IT staff person who's figuring out, oh, we really need to solve a wireless issue here or a password login issue here. Maybe there's a library media specialist who's helping to solve a media issue there. There's some kind of small team of people who's involved in a project that's learning from that. Ideally then, those small communities of teachers have the chance to share what they're doing with other kinds of folks. They're able to go out and get in front of people at department meetings, in school meetings, in teaching fairs, in ed camps, and other kinds of settings. And that inspires other people to be able to plan new kinds of experiments, new kinds of innovations. And we see that this cycle happens within teachers and within teacher communities. It's possible for this cycle to happen with the benign neglect of administration. I've definitely visited schools where there's really exciting things happening, where you start to see innovative practices spread within teacher communities, and administration is sort of not really helping, but also more or less staying out of the way. But it's much, much more powerful if these kinds of cycles can be supported from administrators. Let's take a minute to hear from a teacher about what this kind of experimentation looks like in practice. So in this course, we have sort of voices in practice. We have case studies with lots of different schools that are in the New England area talking about the kinds of innovations that they're working on. And here we'll listen to one teacher from Shrewsbury describe some of her work in trying to lead innovation.
Shaftesbury, Massachusetts. We found her thoughts on this process to be especially insightful.
Experimenting in the classroom can be both exciting and challenging at the same time. Experimenting is exciting because the students are doing something new and you're doing something new, so they pick up on your enthusiasm for a new project or a new topic. It can be challenging because sometimes things don't quite work out the way you expect it to. For example, my students were working on a collaborative book that we were going to all make together about grammar. However, once it got down to the logistical pieces of putting it all together, it just kind of fell apart. So sometimes you try something and it doesn't work, and you just have to say, all right, what am I going to do moving forward to improve this? How could I make this better? But it's exciting when you see the kids get a spark and they get excited about it, and they love doing the project. They see the application of the project in real life, which is really what we're going for, is how is school actually relating to real life? Why does this matter?
So we have this group of innovators trying new things, conducting experiments in their classroom, and some of these things work brilliantly and some of them flop. But in every case, teachers are learning. And usually it's not just one classroom teacher who learns. Usually a whole team of people learn something from these experiences.
So we could let that keep running, but since I'm here, we might as well use me instead of the recorded video. But hopefully you get a sense from that great teacher in Shrewsbury, Kate, of a few things. Is that one is that she feels empowered within her community to try new things. She has the support of her leadership, that some of those things work and some of those things don't. That as she's conducting those experiments, she's getting feedback from her students, she's getting feedback from her peers about how they're working, and that's empowering her and her colleagues to be able to try other experiments. If you're a school leader, your job is to be able to accelerate this cycle. Your job is to be able to figure out what are the kinds of things that you can do to encourage innovation through iteration. What are the kinds of things that you can do to give time, give resources, give support for teachers to be able to conduct more experiments, share more with their colleagues, and then try new ideas. So here are 4 entry points. The arrows in green here represent 4 different kinds of places where we might imagine school leaders being able to come in and to be able to support the work of teachers who are conducting innovations or trying to follow others who have. The first question to ask is, what's the research and development budget in your school? What are the resources of time, of money, of space that you provide to educators who really want to be on the sharp end of innovation, who want to take the new initiatives that you're working towards and really try to bring them to life in your classroom? Some schools do this by giving a subset of teachers, a half course release or a full course release throughout the year to be able to try new things and coach others. There are lots of schools that provide summer funding for teachers to be able to plan and invent new things over the course of the summer. One of the things that lots of schools do is they have professional development budgets, and oftentimes they use them to let teachers learn stuff and kind of do whatever they want. Think about how you could really make sure that those funds are directed towards having new experiments and new innovations happening in schools. Another huge resource to be able to support new experiments are students. One of my favorite trends over the last 5 or 10 years is there are lots of schools around the country who've recognized that students can be an incredibly powerful force in helping support experimentation. I was first exposed to this in the most intimate way at the Burlington High School, which is just a little bit north of where I live in Arlington, Massachusetts. Burlington was the first school to go one-to-one with tablet computers, with iPads, as those came out. And 1,000 tablets spread throughout a high school, and the principal, Patrick Larkin, realized very early on that there was no way that he was going to have enough support to be able to provide IT support to all the teachers and all the students who were trying these new things. But it turned out that one of the largest untapped resources we have in our schools are our students. And Patrick realized that there are lots of students who, in exchange for a release from study hall or some course credit, would be more than happy to devote themselves to supporting new innovations in teaching and learning. So you can go to the Burlington High School now, and any teacher who's having tech trouble throughout the day can call a phone number that's attached to the help desk, or send a tweet out to BHS Help. And students will come rushing into their classroom to help solve the problems they're addressing in that moment. It's also evolved into a kind of genius bar where students can come and work with educators who say, I want to be able to do this kind of thing with technology, but I'm not exactly sure what that is. How could you help me implement that? A second crucial thing that school leaders can do is to make sure that there's time, space, and resources to support team learning. As experiments are being conducted, do teachers and the colleagues they're working with have the time to reflect on these new ideas? Are department meetings filled with logistical drivel that could be replaced with written memos? Or are people in their departments or their PLCs really getting together to say, okay, I tried this new thing and I need your help figuring out whether or not it's working? Two of the most powerful practices in schools for team learning are looking at student work, so systematically examining student work and evaluating how well that student work reflects learning that's a result of new innovation. And then observations or instructional rounds, finding ways for teachers to get inside one another's classrooms. One of my favorite stories recently is I was giving a workshop and an assistant principal said, anytime a teacher wants to be able to visit another teacher's classroom, I just tell them, give me a sub-plan and let me know what I'm supposed to be doing, and I'll go and cover your class for that period. And especially if you want to, if you're giving a test or something like that, and I can just sit there and do my work and give the test, have me do that, and you go watch another teacher who's working in another building. There was another teacher on the far side of the room whose jaw dropped when she heard the assistant principal describe that policy, thinking, wow, how powerful would that be in my school if the leadership team found different ways of being able to do some of their work in classrooms so that teachers could go other places. As these small teams are learning, the next thing to try to figure out is what can you do as a school leader to support institutional learning? What are the conditions that you can create? What are the kinds of resources that you can provide to let teachers share with one another? How do you spread innovative practices across a whole school and district? The Lila G. Frederick Pilot School in Boston, which was founded by Deb Sosha, was the first one-to-one school in the United States that was in an urban area in the heart of Boston. One of the practices that Deb instituted was bagels and laptops. She bought a big pile of bagels and cream cheese every Wednesday morning, and she asked one of her colleagues to present for about 20 minutes on the kind of work that they were doing, one innovative way that they were using technology, one new practice that they were engaged in. And it turned out that there were lots of teachers who were willing to come out and share and learn with their colleagues if they get a chance to get some new ideas and eat some bagels and get some breakfast while they're doing it. There are other school districts that have done teaching fairs that set up a gym with lots of different tables and posters and laptops, let teachers share all the great work that they're doing while other teachers are circulating around the room, learning from one another. It can be great to pair with the opening day of school conferences and things like that. There are lots of schools that are using ed camps or other kinds of unconference models. And I think, again, in faculty meetings or other kinds of times you pull faculty together. Anytime you could take anything that's an announcement that can be turned into a piece of paper, think about how you could replace that announcement time with time for people sharing their learning with one another. And then the final area that I think people can contribute to this cycle of experiment and experience is with a shared vision and a shared instructional language. One of the challenges of innovation, which happens all the time with technologies, is it's possible to let 1,000 flowers bloom and have each of those flowers kind of running off in their own direction. So lots of people are trying new things with technology, but they're not really trying things together. One of the most powerful practices that teachers can adopt, that schools can adopt, is having a shared vision and a shared instructional language to say, you know, for the next year, what we really want to work on together is improving collaboration. For the next year, what we really want to work on is reasoning from evidence. If you were thinking about the year coming ahead, you know, one of the great things to work on might be information literacy, thinking about how to make sense of news and information that's being transmitted through social media and other channels, and how do we separate fact from fiction and propaganda from news. That might be a good thing to think about working on with technology over the course of the next year. By providing this shared focus, and especially in the context of a shared instructional language. So there are lots of tools and resources that communities can use to talk about teaching and learning in the same way. There are resources like Understanding by Design, or Teaching for Understanding, or Universal Design for Learning, or David Merrill's 4 Principles of Instructional Design. There are lots of different resources which give people a language for talking about good teaching and learning. And it actually matters less which of those you choose, and matters more that communities choose one that let them collaborate and talk with one another about what they're learning. You can think of these practices as greasing the wheels of teacher experimentation and sharing. The core thing that you're trying to enable, if you want there to be innovation in your school, is teachers iteratively trying new practices in their classroom. And then as things are working, they're sharing those practices with one another so that other people can begin to implement them. There's always a group, my colleague Peter Senge says there's always a group behind the early adopters. There's always a handful of people who are willing to leap out and try something new. And then right behind them, there's actually in most communities a fairly large group of people we might call patient pragmatists. People who are sitting on the fence of new innovation saying, well, you know, I'm not going to be the first one to dive into that, but if I can see that some things are working, I'm not opposed to it either. I just want some evidence. I want someone else to go out there first, and then I'm willing to get on board and participate in new initiatives. Your job as a school leader is to grease the wheels of teacher experimentation and sharing. So this is just one sample of some of the ideas and some of the stories that we're going to be sharing in this course, Launching Innovation in Schools. You can find it at bit.ly/launching-innovation, or you can go to edX and you can search for Launching Innovation in Schools, or you can search for my name, Justin Reich. You can do a Google search now for Launching Innovation in Schools. It's the first thing that comes up. So there's a couple of different ways to find the course. It'll start on January 17th. It'll run for 6 or 7 weeks. It'll take about an hour or 2 of your time per week during that time. And I think it's going to be a really great learning experience that Peter and I have to offer about what we've learned from Peter's work with systems thinking and the Society for Organizational Learning and MIT, and my work with MIT and EdTech Teacher. Google is equally committed to these kinds of challenges, figuring out how schools can meaningfully change with more than just technology. They have developed this new resource called the Transformation Center, g.co/Transformation Center, and it's a place to be able to share some resources about what good practice in school change and instructional change might look like. Interestingly, Apple and Microsoft are also both in the middle of developing some of these resources, and they're pretty similar to each other, but they're also different in interesting kind of ways. I think the most important thing to learn from having all 3 of these technology giants creating these kinds of resources is the recognition that as powerful as it can be to get technologies out into schools, technology alone is not enough to really support and generate new ideas and new classroom practices. It really takes the support of the human component, helping teachers develop the capacity to conduct experiments, to share what they're learning with others, and then to have that sharing happen throughout a whole school or district. I'm going to be talking some more about these ideas at the EdTech Teacher Innovation Summit that's coming up in San Diego. On February 6th, I'll do a pre-conference workshop called Launching Innovation in Schools, which is a great day to continue to explore these ideas and meet with some of the folks who are helping to do the edX MOOC Launching Innovation in Schools. And then we have a couple of days of conference following that, thinking about how to use Google Apps for Education, Chromebooks, iPads, but then also really focusing on innovation, thinking about how ideas around design thinking, project-based learning, making and maker spaces can help us improve teaching and learning in our schools. We have about 4 minutes left, and just sort of stopping to see if other folks have questions. And it looks like Robert has a terrific one, which is, why should I innovate? In what ways can school communities address resistance to change? This is something that Peter and I talk a lot about the course. And I would say one thing that's really important is to recognize that it's okay to have people who are resistant to change. And in a lot of cases, resistance to change are people who want to make sure that they're working in the best interest of their students. There's a handful of people who might be out there sort of pushing really hard against doing different kinds of things, but that's actually the rarity. It's really more people who are starting from the perspective of, I really care about my students and I want to do right by them. So don't be afraid to start new initiatives by focusing on early adopters, by focusing on people who are most likely to leap in. And then I think the next thing to do is, again, still not worry about those resistors who you may not be able to do anything about anyway, but really focus on the patient pragmatists, really focus on that group in the middle that's figuring out whether or not this is something they want to get on board with. Try to find ways to identify well-respected patient pragmatists who are jumping into a new initiative and sort of celebrating and sharing that work. So Tom and I tell a story often about our work with a school district in Rhode Island. And it was a school district, it was a Catholic school. Lots of really traditional educators, lots of folks who have been there for a long, long time. We were visiting that school district 3 times over the course of a year. We went in September, we gave them some ideas, they got to work, and we were going to come back again in December. And we wanted to start our second meeting, this kind of teacher-to-teacher sharing, by having some people come and talk about the new things they were doing. And when we asked the school to give us some ideas of people who could share, they were telling us about all these 22, 23-year-old hotshots who had sort of gone all in and were really making terrific progress and moving forward. One of the things that we suggested to them is, actually, maybe that's not what we want to, we might feature 1 or 2 of those people, but actually could you give us someone who had really made some terrific progress that might be unexpected, someone who had been at the school a long time, who was well respected by the community, but maybe someone you wouldn't expect to be part of a new change initiative. And it turned out that the teacher's name was Bob. So Tom DeCord and I have referred to these folks as Bob ever since. Part of what you can do to help get more patient pragmatists involved is to find the Bob in your community. Find the person who you weren't expecting to be able to really jump into this, really play a leadership role. I mean, Bob at this Catholic school was pretty close to the end of his career. He was going to be retiring in a year or 2, and he wasn't doing the most amazing work in that school. But people were really enthused, a little bit surprised, really inspired by how much he had committed to this new effort. So by featuring someone who was sort of well respected within that camp of patient pragmatists, that helped move more of those patient pragmatists along and into the initiative. And I'm sure that school to this day still have some folks who are resisting change initiatives, but it's really more important to focus on the kinds of people who can move along rather than the folks who wouldn't necessarily be able to do so. It's 5:30. I don't know if folks have additional questions. I'm sort of checking here. I appreciate people from coming all over the world, coming from Paraguay, coming from all different kinds of places, from Canada, to be able to come and join us. But again, this is just meant to be a sampler and an introduction to some work that we're doing around this. There's a free online course on edX, Launching Innovation in Schools. I hope many of you will have a chance to check it out and enroll and join us. And so thanks so much for spending a half an hour of your time here with me today. And I hope you have a great rest of the conference and rest of the session. So thanks, everybody. I'll go and stop presenting so I can give you a final wave and say thank you. Thanks all. Have a wonderful rest of the Education on Air conference, and take care and good luck.